Hey, Lynn, this is Marissa. I was able to hit start
With
recording.
this first part,
Got it.
we'll stop playing with that button and then deal with that. The fun technical problems. Cohort. All right. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the August 17th. I'm gonna turn off my camera. Maybe that off my bandwidth. I am sorry my power went out in Susanville. Our power company is trying to figure out what happened. So, just to start off with a couple things overall with the cohort and out there in Reedland. Just that the incident business guidance for 2022 changed a little bit in the wording for hazard pay and what a crew is and who gets hazard pay. And that wording has seemed to help this year. I did hear there was a little bit of a kerfuffle on one fire with one person, that internally finance group fire actually turned that person around. So got their as pay. So then we're also trying from the city to get a white paper out about that to help even more. And then also just been hearing a little bit of stuff on ordering and people accepting orders and what people are wanting on orders. It's just a little thing of right now we have reed, reef, and arc, and those are the only positions we have to order from. Well, there's a couple others, but those are the three main ones. And reed can be almost anything. Some people think it's the lead read and other people don't think it's the lead read. So if you're ordering a lead read, please put that in the comments of the order, because other dispatchers and other resource advisors don't think the same that read means lead read. And so you might end up with somebody who accepted a read position and is not ready to be a lead and doesn't want to be a lead when they show up, but they didn't know to contact and get that information about what they were accepting beforehand. Just if you need a lead, make sure it's very clear in your resource order that you put in. That's what you're looking for. So the person who's accepting the assignment knows what they're accepting. I think that's the biggest two things. And the cohort is out there and available to help you get people once you put an order in and get them moving your way. There is a need for archaeologists on the Sequoia for sort of a special project, working in the Sequoia groves doing fuels reduction. It's not a fire assignment, but they are running it like a fire. So they are ordering people through the IROC system and dispatch. So if anybody wants to go as an ARC to the Sequoia and work with big trees, which is really fun, looking for people, contact me and I'll get in touch with the right people. And Peter raised his hand.
Yeah, one caveat on that. I reached out to Ernest, who's kind of serving as the lead ARC on that one, and he says that you have to be a Forest Service employee in order to participate.
Good to know. Yeah, you don't actually need a red card at this point either for that one. get you a red card and even get you a red card as a THSP, according to the forest supervisor. So they're working the system to people. All right. All right, I'll let Marissa take over and monitor this.
All right. Thanks, Lynn. Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Anderson. I'm an ecologist for the Forest Service based in Ogden, Utah. And we have a really good panel today to talk about some lead read perspectives and tips. So we have 3 folks on the panel, and if you're able to, with your connections, I think Tom, Cedar, and Lynn, they are our panelists. And yeah, thank you. Have your cameras on if you have a strong enough connection. And we're just going to jump into it here and kind of. I have some standard questions for you 3, and then I think at the end we can open it up to the whole group. So throughout this next 50 minutes or so, I try to think of if you have any questions or comments for this panel. They are very experienced, and I think we'll learn a lot today. So our first question, the standard, just each of you please introduce yourself, who you are, where you work, agency, your work background with your normal job and with fire. And are you a lead read and or a read liaison on an incident management team? So Cedar, maybe I'll have you go first.
Sure. Hey, good morning, everybody. Cedar Drake here. So my day job currently is that I'm detailing as an ecologist for the Pacific West Region Office of Fire and Aviation Management, focusing on resource advising, bear, fire planning, and fire ecology. When I'm not in my detail, I'm the lead fire effects monitor at North Cascades National Park, and I've been in that position for about 15 years or so. My background, I've got a master's in resource management with an emphasis on fire ecology and restoration ecology. My first fire was in 93, and my first read assignment was in 2010, and my first lead read assignment was in 2011. Since then, I've been pretty involved in serving as both a reef and as a read. I've been getting involved in bear as well, and yeah, love resource advising. Been involved with developing a curriculum for the Park Service and teaching a resource advisor course. If anybody on the call is interested in becoming a read, we do offer an online course in the springtime, so you can just reach out to me directly. Glad to be here today.
Thank you, Cedar. Tom, can you go next?
Certainly. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm Tom Bates. I am the forest plant ecologist on the Arapahoe-Roosevelt National Forest and Pawnee National Grassland in Colorado. I'm definitely the least experienced of the 3 panelists. I've been in my position since 2009, and I've been involved with bear since about 2010 and fire since 2005. Actually, I still do some operational assignments here and there as FFT2, and do fire effects monitoring for prescribed fire, and also do logistics work on incident management teams. My read background is, like I said, I'm less experienced than the others, but I've worked with 11 different teams, all on the Cameron Peak fire. So I have a number of assignment experiences, all from the same incident, and that's where I trained as a lead read and became the lead read as well. I also serve as the READ coordinator for the forest. And I just want to throw my weight behind this idea that the Bear Team Leader acronym is a BEAL, and I think we really need, it's at the point that we need to kind of codify this concept of the READ Team Leader, and I think it should be known as an REAL.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your input on that. Lynn, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Lynn Gasaway. I'm the Heritage Program Manager and Travel Relations Liaison on the Lhasa National Forest. Also the chair of the NWCG Resource Advisor Subcommittee. My background is I just sort of fell into fire about 1997. Probably did my first quasi lead in about 98 or 99. And also did my master's on Native American burning in the Sierra Nevada, specifically Yosemite Valley, where and why they were burning. Then more recently, after doing a lot of big leads, I got asked to join Pacific Northwest Team 3, type of an incident management team, as one of their liaisons, and specifically being liaison for resource advisors. So I've been doing that. This is my 5th season with Pacific Northwest Team 3. That's Tom's one thing that we are trying to get lead read codified NWCG position, but I'm sort of stuck. We're stuck with an old acronym that came out of All Hazards, and it's REAC, REAC, for coordinator. And that's it.
Or it could be pronounced react. Don't want to sound like we reek.
Great. All right. Thank you for those intros. And I think that was a good segue, Lynn. And maybe, Lynn, could you kind of explain the difference between a lead read and an incident management team-based read liaison?
Sure. So the lead read is someone that the agency administrator appoints, and that person works for the agency administrator. So they work for the local unit, and our direct supervisor, and who they're getting their marching orders from, really technically is the agency administrator or the agency rep. So they can get their time signed by people on the team. It used to always be plans, but that's now changed. The liaison officer position is that they are a member of the team, the incident management team. They are part of the D&G, the command general staff. They're actually part of the command staff, and they work directly for the incident commander. And the additional liaison work with subgroups, make sure that they're getting all the information that they need. Fire and the team, the incident commander, is getting all the information they need about those outside groups and their so it's a lot of working with the sheriffs, the local communities. A big part of it can be evacuation notices and where the fire is, so that the sheriff can make those decisions on evacuations. So cooperators meetings are run by liaisons. So the READ liaison is pretty new, been around about a decade now. sort of at first explored by the Pacific Northwest. I think Team 2 held it for the longest time. Then those people moved on to new positions and couldn't do it. And then Team 3 decided to do it. Like Alaska has, they actually bring their people on as reads, but they work in the liaison shop. And then Southwest has some doing liaisons for reading. So and I started thinking the same way. I'm making sure that the reads are getting all the information they need and that the team is getting all the information that it needs from the reads, and also just making sure everybody is filling out the right paperwork and getting it right and making it easier on the team or the read back and forth.
Thank you. Cedar and Tom,
And
did you have?
to go back for where the lead is, overseeing all the different resource advisors that are working on that fire and interacting with the team with what the resource issues are.
Thank you, Lynn. Cedar or Tom, did you have anything to add to that?
I could add just a couple things here. Just so folks are clear, the lead read is a required position on a fire, certainly a fire that's type 3 or higher. Whereas the read loafer position necessarily isn't. I mean, there may be a loafer associated with a team, but there's not always a read loafer. So it's not something that you're going to encounter on all incidents. And I'll say myself, the first time I've actually encountered someone in this position was just a month ago when I was on the Washburn fire. And that was the first time that I've been approached by a team liaison officer that was, quasi dedicated to working with the lead read. So it may be something that you don't encounter on most incidents, but I think there is a trend, an increasing trend that you'll see more of that in the future.
Thanks, Cedar. And could you define loafer for everyone?
Yeah, loafer is just the 4-letter acronym for a liaison officer. So oftentimes, we'll refer to a liaison officer that's dedicated to the resource advisors would be a read loafer. So that's the position that Lynn holds on her team.
Thank you. Tom, did you have anything to add to this question?
Just I've worked with, in fact, I think it was probably Pacific Northwest 2. They had a read loafer that I worked with, and it can go both. I mean, it's great to have that because it's the dedicated person to kind of to command and general staff. So you have, a good line to move information backwards and forwards. It definitely can make things easier. It's not always necessary if you have a good relationship with your operations section chief. That works usually just as well. But sometimes having the added layer is good. Sometimes it creates just more layers. So it's not, it can be good. It's nice that they're thinking about it.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna move on to our next question here. So what are the benefits of having an assigned lead read or the read liaison officer? And do you think is one better than the other? And maybe I'll let Cedar go first here.
Sure. I think an important distinction is that they're different positions and that they do different things. So like Lynn said, the lead read is working for the agency administrator, and they're representing that home unit in terms of the protection of natural and cultural resources, sensitive resources. Whereas the LOFR, the liaison officer, is working for the incident management team. And their job is more that conduit of information and communication with the team. So they're different positions. In a sense, they're kind of apples and oranges. So you can't completely compare one to the other in terms of one is better than the other. They're just different positions. I think in terms of benefits for the lead read, obviously, like, it's great when the lead read can be local. And if that's the case, then they're going to know the resources on that unit. They're going to know the issues that are going on. They'll have the contacts with the resource specialists. They'll be able to source more reefs and arcs and culls. They'll have relationships with the line officers, with the AAs. They'll have relationship with the tribes potentially. So, and they might have even been a lead read on another incident in that area. So there's a lot of institutional knowledge that a local lead read can bring. The other thing that, again, I haven't had a lot of experience working with read loafers. My first experience was really just a month ago, and I'm all a big fan of like being one team on fire and that we're all working together for common goals. The one thing that I'm skeptical about, and I'd be really curious to hear Lynn's take on this, recognizing that the loafers work for the team, and it's sort of built in that they are representing the incident management team, and they're representing the needs, the agenda of the IC, whereas the lead read is working for the home unit, and they're representing that agenda and that focus. So I think that sometimes there could be some challenges in that loafer position where they may have a different agenda than the lead read does. And of course, the goal is to work together, to find solutions, right? To find the best way to manage the fire with the least amount of impact, to suppress the fire safely with the least amount of impact. But that's always a question that I have in the back of my mind, is that loafer does come with their own agenda, which may be different from that of providing the best protection for natural and cultural resources. The only other thing I would offer is, the one thing with the loafer, and I think that Tom kind of brought this up, is it does bring in one other level of like a player in that line of communication. That's kind of like telephone. So if you start to rely too heavily on that loafer position and you stop as the lead read interfacing directly with the operations section chief and the planning section chief and those individual members of the team, there is the possibility that your message can, not come through accurately. So there's always a risk there. On the other side, on the Washburn fire, this was actually quite interesting. There was a lot of COVID going on the fire. So the teams, the type 2 teams, they did something they said was the first time that they'd heard of it, where they did an entirely remote transition from one team to the other team. So they didn't actually see each other at all. They didn't share any like in-person meetings with each other. Everything was done virtually. So that was extremely hard coming in I came in as a lead read basically right as that transition was happening. So I had the transition of, stepping into the role, and then the fact that there was a team transition and the teams weren't like really meshing super tightly. One of the ways that incoming incident management team dealt with that is they did assign a liaison officer to work with me directly as the lead read. And initially that was just through the phone, on Teams meetings, and then that person came directly to our evening read meetings. And that worked really well. That was a very effective conduit of exchanging information when I wasn't able to access the team as a whole. So yeah, I think it brings a lot of capabilities. But again, I always am a little bit skeptical, in terms of just maybe the differences in priorities or agendas.
Thank you, Cedar. Tom, did you have anything to add?
Just that I agree completely with Cedar, and I just the big benefit that it brings is that this person is not just a liaison officer, they're first a read, and they need to have that qualification first before they move on to that. And so it does put a person on that C&G, that command and general staff, that has those sensibilities to begin with, hopefully, and can, keep that idea of resource protection at the front of the discussions, potentially more than a lead read can. That being said, the lead read position is essential. You cannot run with just a read loafer. I don't think it would work that way, and because of what Cedar was saying with either it's a local person or it's a person from outside that's working with the local unit to make sure all of the concerns are addressed.
Thanks, Tom. Lynn, did you have anything to add to the question about the benefits? Lynn, if you're speaking, I don't hear you.
You're
Okay,
muted, Lynn.
I think I'll move on to the next question here. Is she's still on the call too? Let's see. Actually, I don't see her on the call, so she may have connection issues, so that's okay. All right, I'll move on to the next question here. So based on your experiences, what are some keys for success for a new reed reef or archaeologist joining a reed team, whether they're experienced or a trainee, if they're working for you as if you're a lead reed or a reed liaison officer? So keys for success for a new reed joining your team. What should they be aware of? And Tom, I'll let you go first.
Sure, thanks. I think being prepared to be in the field. Obviously, these are those, as a reef or arc, you're going to be on the lines. Hopefully we have enough folks that we have people assigned specifically to divisions, geographical divisions, so that they can really develop those relationships with division supervisors and task force leaders and heavy equipment bosses, so that they can affect what they need to. And that requires being boots on the ground. It's being ready to move around to make sure you're at briefings if we're running remote and running through forward operating bases, really tying in with them, but getting back to read meetings as well. It's a busy life. So it's I guess flexibility is it's the big one. But Cedar, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, it's all about being adaptable, right? I mean, that's the nature of fire. It's always changing. Can't get too comfortable because it's going to change. Yeah, I love this question. I love dispensing wisdom to first-time resource advisors and ARCs. I'd start off by just imploring folks that they shouldn't be afraid to ask questions, and they shouldn't be afraid to ask for help, because this is a group effort. and everybody learns something during every fire. It's not like you step into this knowing the answers to everything. I mean, every fire throws a couple curveballs at you, and you have to learn something totally different. So don't be afraid to speak up. Definitely encourage people to pair up with other folks. Tell people don't be in a rush to get qualified. This is a job that you learn by doing. So take the time to work with a variety of people, a variety of lead reads, a variety of reefs or arcs, to just get a rounded experience there. And don't just be on this track to like have, you know, one incident and then be qualified and be expected to do the work on your own. I think it's really important to understand the roles and responsibilities of your position. You know, the core thoughts of like the fact that we work for the AA, but we work with the IMT, that the reads advise and the ops decide, and to grasp a really firm understanding of ICS. Because when you're in those situations where you don't know what to do, like you can reflect on those core sort of tenets of resource advising to negotiate these situations, which sometimes are very gray and confusing. Like to implore to folks that they understand that the position changes throughout the incident. So, you know, I call it like that first phase is running and gunning, where you're like chasing after the dozers and you're trying to minimize impacts, and it's a very sort of responsive type of space to be in a lot of times. Then you got that lull phase before suppression repair starts, where you're gathering intel, you're getting stuff in field maps, and then you've got suppression repair, which is kind of its own thing as well. So recognizing that, you know, there's going to be 3 different phases, and depending where you step into the incident, you know, your job's going to be a little bit different. I also think it's really important that incoming folks understand that it's so important that we maintain consistency in the read message. So that's one of the things we always get dinged on is, you know, the team or the division says, oh, well, this read said that, and that read said that. And like, we don't really trust the fact that you know what you're talking about, because everybody's telling us something different. And that's a bad place to be in as a resource advisor. So, you know, encouraging folks that if you don't know the answer, then you know, ask somebody that does. You know, reach out to a branch reef or reach out to your lead read. Tell folks that you don't know, and you'll find out for them, and bring that to your lead read. Bring that to the evening read meeting, because that consistency of message is really crucial. Likewise, you know, be prepared to explain why we're asking folks to do what they're doing. But recognize that we don't always have to tell them that. I mean, sometimes it's like they just need to know, what can I do? What can I do? Type of thing. So you want to just keep it that way. And that whole concept of task, purpose, and end state, you know, that is core to leaders' intent. You know, carry that forth as a reef in the field. So, you know, this is what we're advising on. This is what we'd like it to look like, and this is sort of why we're asking you to do that. Can I keep going, Marissa? I'm on a roll right now. Okay. Cool. So again, like safety, I don't think you can stress that enough. I think as a lead read, you need to hold that up as like the banner that you carry in front of you, and you need to just create that safety culture, and you need to soak that into every message and every meeting, particularly with new folks. And you know, stress the fact that there's nothing out there that's worth getting injured or killed for. And there's a lot of things that can do that. You know, it's dangerous, and especially if you don't have a lot of experience working around fire, you may not be aware of the hazards that are out there. And I do like to stress to folks that, you know, the best chances of you getting hurt is from driving, because you're tired, or there's a lot of traffic on the road, or there's stuff that's rolled down or fallen on the road, or the other thing that's going to get you is snacks. So, you know, I like to bring it up every evening at the read meeting as like a sort of a call for safety issues from the group, and then we can go through that and then come up with mitigation measures, or just avoid those areas if needed. I think it's really important that people understand that to be good at this job, you really have to get engaged at the division level. So you have to get away from that us, them mentality, and really approach this from like, hey, we're all on the same team here. Like, we're all dealing with this fire. It's a common challenge. and you've got, you know, your role is to obviously put out the fire, and my role is to, you know, advise you on how we can do that in a way that's effective and safe, but with the minimal amount of impact to all the other stuff that's important. So kind of just like showing up with that mindset and that attitude, showing up with ideas, showing up with potential solutions, not being a person that just says no, but rather is like, okay, well, let's figure this out, you know, be it a compromise or be it some kind of innovative solution. Approach those firefighters as colleagues rather than adversaries, and take the time to build the relationships when you're out on the line, because it all comes down to human relationships. I mean, you build those connections and then people will do things for you. And then really, like, the last thing is that you're just going to do the best with the tools you have and the time you have available. I've been in so many incidents where the reefs come in and they're in tears, they're frustrated, you know. It's just not a job for perfectionists. Like, you're working with a moving target. Like Tom said, you have to be adaptable, you have to be flexible, you're gonna have to prioritize your efforts, and sometimes things are just gonna break. I mean, there's just no way around it. So you got to get used to change, you got to get used to disappointment, and you just got to be adaptable. It's the name of the game. And lastly, you know, warn people, don't eat all the food they give you, because you don't need that much food unless you're climbing 5,000 miles of dozer line every day or something. So that's it for me.
Cedar, yeah, I don't like having to turn into a salt block by the end of a fire. So, yeah. Thank you for that. And I don't see Lynn back on the call yet. Lynn, if you are on, or if you joined by phone, please speak up now. Otherwise, I'll go on to our last question, and then we can open it up to the group for questions. Okay, so now Lynn, our last question then for Cedar and Tom from our stock questions is, so based on your experiences, what are several keys for success for a person actually serving as a lead read or a read liaison officer? And Tom, I'll let you go first.
Sure. So I think, so I'll speak as a, you know, lead read, since I don't really know the position of a lead as a read liaison officer that well. But, you know, from a local area standpoint, if you're local, you know, it's all the pre-work that you need to do, getting, being in touch with the other specialists, your heritage folks, your biologists of all flavors, your recreation specialists, and understanding where those values of concern are, working with your GIS folks to make sure that material is available, and then working with your WFDS people, whoever's doing WFDS on your forest, to make sure those layers are available when they get to the point of needing to make a decision. And then, of course, obviously developing those relationships with the agency administrators locally. This helps you. You know, it helps your local unit. It helps you as a leader, and it helps you when you're going to other areas as well, because you're keeping those premises, those ideas in your mind. And when you go to a new area, you know who you need to get in touch with and who you need to work with, and see if they already have information in place, and or if you're going to need to develop that once you get there.
Thanks, Tom. Cedar, your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Tom. I always say pre-planning is half the battle. And, you know, I think one of the strongest Well, I'll speak for myself. One of my strongest suits as a lead read, and everyone has different ways of approaching it, is that I'm a pretty organized person. And I find it's really useful to set up systems that people can plug into. So like I'm a huge fan of a common incident read drive that's usually hosted on a cloud where people have their folders where they can include their unit logs and photos and their reef reports, and we have a common location for reference material, all sorts of stuff. So I'm all about systems. I'm also a huge fan of this thing called Incident Read Guide, which is something that Lynn developed a few years ago, which basically just condenses down the read message by resources. So it's like, hey, this is important, and this is how we are advising that you minimize or avoid impact to the site, and actually have that as a printed document. Get that in the hands of all your resource advisors. Like that's kind of their marching orders. It's kind of their script, and make sure the team has it as well. And I print those things out by the 100, and I'm like, instruct all the reads, like give that to everybody. You know, I want the crew bosses, I want the task force leaders, I want the squad bosses to have them, I want the tender operator, you know, everybody who's anybody. And people are bored on fire, so they'll read that stuff, you know. So, you know, give it out like a gift, basically. You know, so systems, I mean, there's a new one that just came out. I believe Lynn put that together in the Oak Fire, which I thought was really cool. She had like just a one pager on documentation for reads. So something that you can hand to a read on InBrief and say, hey, these are our expectations for you on a daily basis and for your reef report, to kind of like prepare people as to what kind of information they should be documenting and how. As well as she put a one pager together. I think Heidi Ogle put a one pager together for notation and field maps. So like anything you can do to create these systems that you can obviously adapt from incident to incident will make it much, much easier for you as a lead read, because you just have so much going on. And as many systems as you can get in place, the better. Like I said before, I think your top priority as a lead read has always got to be taking care of your reads, fostering that safety culture, fostering an environment where people feel safe to speak up, to ask questions. Something Lynn brought up in a lead read training a couple years ago that really stuck with me was like, whenever you sign your folks' CTRs, take a moment to like look them in the eye and check in with them and ask them, hey, how are you doing? You know, and recognize as lead read, I mean, some of the work you'll be doing is supporting people not only logistically and with information and, you know, equipment, but you're going to be sometimes supporting them emotionally as well. And that's an opportunity to check in and see if people are burning out and maybe they need to take a day in the office or something like that. So pretty important. As a lead read too, I think it's really, really important to learn how to delegate responsibilities. That was a huge one for me to learn. And on my first incident as a lead, actually my second incident, because I learned it during the first one, I put a huge note on my computer that said delegate, because I had to remember that I can't do everything and I shouldn't be doing everything. So don't hesitate to pull in like a deputy lead read or an admin lead read to support you. Because the more people that you bring in on your team, obviously the more capabilities and capacity you have on the fire, but your administrative level goes up, you know, steeply. And that can really eat your lunch if you're spending the whole day dealing with ordering and demob and performance evaluations and, you know, the division assignments. And it's a lot of paperwork when it'd be great for you to focus on other things. Another great one is utilizing this concept of branch reefs. So that's just a name that we made up. It's not an official name, but it's like more experienced reefs that you have in the field who can become like the primary point of contact in a division or in a branch, so that when a question comes up out in the field, you know, those reefs or arcs can check in with that branch reef and see if they can get the questions solved at that field level. And if they can't, then you've got one point of contact as a lead read, then reaching out to you with that question, either a phone call or on the radio or at, you know, evening briefing or something. So building those levels that of that chain of command, span of control type of thing that's in ICS, building that in the read team is really crucial. And that's a great intermediary step for reefs to become a lead read. That's kind of like a good learning experience for them to manage a group of reefs in a division or a branch. Recognize as a lead read that a lot of your job is basically setting up your read team for success. So, you're gonna be there to, create a container for them to work in terms of like the office space, making sure there's internet, providing them with guidance in terms of task purpose and end state. And a lot of that comes through the incident read guide, through the suppression repair plan. You're going to be providing them with information, with equipment, with admin support, with logistical support, and like I said, emotional support. So that's a big part of the job, is just, care and feeding of your reads so that they have what they need to be successful in the field, because, they're doing the work out there. Maintaining that consistency in the read message, like I just can't stress that enough. That's so important. It comes down to the incident read guide. It comes down to the evening meetings. So discussing those things and the importance of having everyone there, so you come up with common conventions that everyone is using and everyone is speaking the same message across the incident is huge. Making sure you pace yourself is crucial. I mean, these incidents can be intense, 16+ hour days for, 14 days or sometimes 28 or longer. You got to pace yourself. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You got to practice self-care, and that can be really hard if you're like really dedicated to the cause. But in all honesty, the middle of the day is kind of a quiet time as a lead read. And I'll do full disclosure. I mean, I'll go take a shower. I'll go take a nap if I need to. I'll go take a walk. Whatever you need to do to just maintain that level of being sustainable and caring for yourself and caring for your people and thinking clearly. That middle time of the day is a good time to do that. And in all honesty, the incident management team does that as well. So it's nothing unique to the lead read or anything like that. Something else I like to always kind of remind myself is like asking myself, is this really a crisis? Because things come up, suddenly there's a lot of emotion, there's panic, and it's like you have to stay rational and detached and maintain a certain level of perspective. And if you can, take some time to make decisions, sleep on it, talk to other subject matter experts, talk to other lead reads. Like I have my network of lead reads and mentors that I reach out to when I'm not sure about a situation. And I, try not to be too reactive and jump on a decision, but actually take some time to think about it. Have compassion for the people around you. I don't know how many times, like, it's just, emotions just come out and people have short fuses, and to just remind myself, it's like, hey, everybody here is overstressed, overworked, exhausted. And it's like, you gotta factor that in, and you got to give people, a little bit of wiggle room with that. And then lastly, as the lead read, is just thinking ahead, like planning ahead. So make sure that you're obviously like, dealing with the day you're in or the next day, but you need to really be thinking 3 to 5 days out. You need to be figuring out what ops is planning on doing, where they're going to be working, what treatments they're at. If they've got a PACE map, which is I always forget what it stands for, primary, auxiliary, contingency, emergency. It's like basically their potential lines or potential treatments that they're going to put in. See if you can see that. Make sure you're checking in with ops multiple times a day so that you've got that stuff on your radar and you can start to plan ahead in terms of having the right numbers of people, the right specializations of people, having them in the right place, because you don't want those kind of surprises. And and you hear these trigger words, like whenever you hear the phrase rolling hose, if you hear the first time you hear that, that means suppression repair is probably like 2 to 5 days out. So you need to start thinking suppression repair when you hear rolling hose. So stuff like that. In terms of the loafer read, again, I have very little experience with that, and I hope Lynn can come back on because she's really knowledgeable about that position. I guess the only thing I would concur with Tom is that I think a person that is in that position, it's really important that they have some experience as a reef, particularly as their lead read, so they can really understand the roles, the relationships, the limitations. That relationship with the agency and the IMT is really crucial. So there's a lot of subtleties there, and it really takes doing that job to be able to be effective in that, right? So that's it.
Thank you, Cedar and Tom. That was really good. And I still don't see Lynn on the call unless she snuck in a different way. Lynn, are you on? Okay, well, let's take these last couple minutes. We're going to open it up to the group for questions. So raise your hand. I'll call on you. We do have one question in the chat so far I can ask Cedar and Tom. So yeah, please post your questions either in the chat or raise your hand. And one question we had a bit ago was, how early in an incident are lead, read, loafer, and the rest of read teams ordered? It seems like a constant game of catch up to stay ahead of the rest of fire operations. And whoever wants to answer, go for it.
I guess I'll start. It really varies. It really depends. It depends a lot on the potential for the fire. It depends on the impacts that you have threatened. You know, I know at my home park, you know, the reeds are involved on anything that's larger than, let's say, a single tree fire. Just in terms of like what we'll go in and check in our home unit read guide and check through our GIS layers to see if there's any issues in that area. If we didn't have any known issues, then we might not need to have anyone involved at that point. But once it definitely progresses into like a type 3 incident, we would definitely have folks involved. Even a type 4 incident, if it appears that sensitive areas are threatened. Obviously, it depends too on what the suppression actions are going to be. So, if you're going to start bringing in heavy equipment or even digging line or applying retardant, then you probably want to have some level of resource advisors involved. And then obviously that's going to scale up just like anything in ICS relative to the complexity of the incident and the response. You have anything else to add?
Yeah, I would just add that based on what you're saying, I mean, going off of that, it depends on the fire management officers on the local unit and the agency administrators when they feel that they want to get people involved and to be proactive as a reef or as a read or a lead read or a read coordinator on your local unit. Developing those relationships with the fire management staff and with agency administrators and letting them know, keep providing that front loading, if you will, for the importance of being involved in those situations as soon as possible. The Kruger fire last year that we had, relatively small fire, it just went type 3. But we had some significant events on it. I was involved with the fire management officer and the WFDS writer, developer, operator the first few hours that was happening and getting in touch with our archaeologists and everyone else to make sure that we knew what was on the ground. And as it turns out, I spent a few days walking the lines and was able to get 2 of our archaeologists out there for training assignments. But I guess my point is develop the relationships early, just as Cedar was talking about, and then that will help the people who are making the orders remember to order you before it blows up. and we won't have to be chasing things as quite as badly.
Thank you. I'll go to some of the hands. So Scott Bodel, go ahead.
Yep. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I just had a question. There's been a bit of a trend these last couple of years in large scale contingency lines. And I just wanted to see if you had any inputs on the planning, prescriptions, and, just what's going on with those contingency lines. I've been responsible for repairing a lot of them, but I haven't actually been on the early phase of the planning, and was hoping maybe you could shed some light on that.
Well, yeah, there's certainly an increased trend in fighting fire through indirect methods, and particularly if you work in California and you work with CAL FIRE, it's kind of like an octopus that can go out miles and miles. I remember being in the Sobranes fire and as a reef, and we were finding contingency mile 10 miles away from the fire's edge, to the point that we weren't sure if that was lined from that fire or from a previous fire from the year before. So they're all starting to mesh together. All I can say, Scott, on that one is just work with that home unit as best as you can. Work with those resource specialists to get a clear sense from them in terms of, first of all, like explain to them the impacts that you're anticipating, and the fact that there's going to be residual effects from these contingency lines, and see what their directives and what their perspectives are on how we can do that in the least impactful way. We got to be really careful with that, remember, because we are advisors. We're not dictating tactics, and creating these contingency lines and making them so they are effective is a tactic for sure. So I would say, lean on those home unit staff and try to explain to them, hey, this is what's going to happen. These are the impacts that are going to happen. And this is, you might even want to confer to the agency rep or the agency administrator, like, this is the amount of suppression repair that's going to be required to repair these. And these are going to be the long-term impacts that are going to persist beyond suppression repair. Yeah, it's tricky, and it's definitely a trend, and something that we're seeing increasingly. It's getting real kind of gray area where home units, or not home units, but the incident management teams are actually sort of develop these contingency lines as sort of permanent fire breaks or shaded fuel breaks. So it's a question of like how much they're taking and how much work they are getting accomplished under the auspices of creating a contingency line, and then maybe not necessarily repairing these back to a pre-state condition, but repairing to them to a different condition so they can be used for fire suppression in the future. So that is definitely a gray area. Be curious to hear what other folks think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that, Cedar. It's certainly something that we've seen a lot, and I think it's, yeah, not getting into the tactics. It's just something that we need to help steer at least away from important values.
Well, we're at the hour. Lynn, I did see you hopped on. Did you have any items you wanted to add in? I do see that Charles still has a hand up, and we did have an outstanding question in the chat. Maybe Cedar/Tom/Lynn could answer those in the chat. But just being respectful of everyone's time, and Lynn was able to join. Did you have any last comments, Lynn? We made some good progress. We missed you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the internet power and then internet all went down. It just came back. So sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what to add because I missed everything. I'm sure these guys covered most of it. I guess the last part I just did hear about the contingency line stuff. And maybe one thing to add in there, my team's being called up. We're gonna go replace PNW2 off of the Cedar Creek fire. And if you look at the Cedar Creek fire right now, it's in an inaccessible place. It is 0% containment. It's been out there for at least 3 weeks, I think. At least 2 weeks because of the team's been there 2 weeks. They're expected to go until the snow flies, and they're building contingency lines way out. It's a big box because and right now there was a good video put out by the fire yesterday about that concept, and that and strategic planning. I think we're gonna have to really. There's a whole new gambit with strategic planning and strategic risk assessments. And the teams, not all teams, but a lot of teams are starting to move that way. Knowing we can't, with these fires, go direct. And so we're going to have a lot of contingency lines way out. And yeah, working long term with those teams and getting the resource issues into the strategic planning. We should have more time, but it also means the teams have to be open with the reads, and the reads have to be open to working that far out. It's held up in the courts. It's gone to courts for the big lines way far out to protect communities, and it's been won in the courts for doing those, that it's okay under NEPA and everything else because of the emergency situation. So it is sort of the world we're living in. But yeah, how we're going to deal with it's going to be a long-term issue.
Okay, well, thank you for all that. I think we need to wrap it up here. If you still have an outstanding question, I think maybe for the benefit of you and the whole group, maybe you can type it in the chat, and maybe Cedar, or Tom, or Lynn could answer it at some point, and then we can all see what the answer is. But yeah, I want to thank everyone for today's call, and also especially our panelists who are very experienced as lead reads or the read liaison officer position. And so I think that's it for today. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there. Take care of your people.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.
Lynn and Tom, I don't have access to the chat. I don't know if it's because it's a Forest Service Teams meeting, so any questions in there to defer to you guys.
Okay.
I think the one that we didn't get to was is a lead read required for type 3 or greater regardless of agency, or is that role reserved by the AA generally on some agencies? And then there was a lingering hand, but he lowered the hand at some point. But that was, I think, the last question we weren't able to get to.
You know, I just think you need a lead read anytime you have more than 2 or 3 reefs. Basically, or 2 or 3 reefs or arcs. It's just span of control at that point. So I think there's any rule.
No, you don't even technically, since the position doesn't exist. You don't need it anywhere. It's all up to the AA and internally within the group of reads. But I agree, just for communication between the team, so that you have a consistent message. The team's not getting bombarded, even a type 3 team bombarded with 4 different questions or answers to their issues, or that having one lead is good. Todd
Hey,
just
Lindsay.
threw his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead. Whoever's got their hand up, you can ask your question. Todd Ellsworth.
Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. That was great. So just so we have, in the Washington office, Forest Service Washington office now, we're starting to build this like post-fire recovery organization where like Cara Farr and Dave Callery were like originally like Washington office of bear coordinators. And it's sort of morphed into now we have the bar program. Now they're sort of bar, and now it's even morphing more into like read a bit. And so I don't think it's official yet, but they sort of, like Cara's title now is, like post-fire recovery coordinator. It's not bear bar coordinator. So I think, I think the Forest Service are sort of evolving to have that more national support, like we've talked about, regional support for reed reefs, coordination and national recognition that we need to have some national support, and like you guys do in the Park Service, like Rich Schwab and stuff. So that's looks like that's where we're trending pretty strongly, like quickly.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Really needed. It's not
Yeah.
really a grassroots thing anymore. It's
It's not a grassroots thing anymore.
Wait till we get the task books,
Yeah,
and
well,
the positions
especially, when we're dealing with these issues, like, we're building contingency line 10 miles from the fire and stuff, and just we need that support to be able to address those issues and have that, equal standing with FAM to have, and talk about those issues pre-season in the winter, how we're going to address those larger issues, how we're going to staff larger teams. We have mega fires, just all, all those types of issues. And how is Reed going to then go into, provide information for bear? How can Reed, collect that information and longer term, when the units are looking at longer term recovery, the Reed information is our first line of information. Super important. How are we going to make those links? So anyway, we're working on all that stuff.
Yeah.
got some ideas.
I would say that
Go ahead, Lynn.
one thing that's we need coordination with the fire planners, because right now there's been such a big push for fire planning and pods, but pods haven't gone through NEPA. But then once there's a fire, or all those lines that are pod lines are all of a sudden shaded fuel breaks or fuel breaks. And it's like, well, you just completely skipped NEPA, never coordinated those pod lines with anybody but the AAs and the line officers.
Yeah.
So you don't know what you're going to impact. And, oh, well, you put a line there before 5 years ago. Well, I just came off of a fire where, yeah, the line was put in five years ago during Ferguson. They said, oh, we'll stay on the Ferguson line, except they didn't read the little part that said road as line, and they decided we didn't want this year to put it as road as line. So they went right through like 6 arc sites that they didn't go through during Ferguson because they weren't coordinating. They just said, oh, we had a line there before, but they didn't put it in the same footprint.
Yeah.
They want to keep it as a line again. There's just no.
I know. Well, just, both the Washburn and the Oak Fire used, Ferguson lines, used other older lines, that were out there 3 or 4 times, that have been out, especially in Oak Fires, So I think one of the other issues too, I don't know what you guys think about this, is like, obviously in bear, we track and try to take care of some of the weed issues. But what we saw in Washburn and Oak, it's like, well, these lines are like, are cheatgrass and weed infested. And so, under suppression repair, we never deal with weeds. We have to deal with it under bear. And it's just always, even for suppression repair, we deal with it under bear. It always seems like that's like an issue that maybe suppression should be, taking a little bit harder look at, but maybe that's a bigger issue.
We do track that and try to put it in the read report with the understanding that, my understanding is that the suppression account closes after a year, but the reality is that it can be used for a slightly longer period of time, maybe a
Absolutely.
couple years.
Yeah.
And always my understanding is that we try to document that stuff in our read report, and identify that as a future suppression repair treatment that needs to occur and should occur from suppression dollars. So,
Yeah.
but I don't think all lead reads do that or recognize that. So
No.
it'd be a good
Well,
stand.
yeah, and I think that that's
Yeah.
super good, and again, that can be passed on to the
The-
bear team. And then now in the Forest Service, we have the bar program where we can treat weeds for 3 years. So, and having that information that you guys collect back to the forest, so the forest can put in a request for the bar funds too. I think that's super important. So, I mean, that's sort of the way we just deal with it.
The
which
P-
is-
PICA can be open for 5 years.
Hmm.
According
Yeah.
to the red book, the PICA could be open for 5 years. I would say almost every fire I show up on, the delegation or the WFDS says weed wash. The problem is manning the weed wash and implementing it in a way that actually would stop weeds. It's just having one in ICP. Isn't really. It's a Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid that doesn't fit the wound. And we can't get them. For some reason, even though we've been asking for them for decades, we can't seem to get them.
Well, and weed washes are, they're great as far as keeping new material potentially off the land. But if you have, like in the situation where you have these ongoing contingency lines that are getting used over and over, they may already be infested. And the areas that are infested already aren't going to be helped with a weed wash station unless you have it, as machinery is on each division, where machinery is getting washed on a regular basis whenever it moves from place to place. Even then, it would be hard. But the nice thing is, Bear does, the time restriction is problematic, but Bear does allow for treatment of suppression related activities for weeds. It's not just extant infestations. But really, you got to look to bar for real significant treatment, because it's years out. It's not 1 year after containment, which is
exactly
which Bear restricts you to.
I just, as we do have all these like reburned areas, I just see that as sort of it's an issue that we're gonna just have to keep dealing with, and it just was like smacked us in the face this year with some of these air fires, like on the Sierra and Yosemite. I'm sure other areas too, just the ones I'm familiar with. Briceburg fire, that was the other one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
There's lines from the Briceburg fire out there too. So yeah, it's just it's sort of an interesting thing that's the whole issue of how should we repair these dozer lines and what should they look like and all that kind of stuff. I know it's that's sort of a bigger issue to deal with.
Yeah, there's
But
so
those
much
dozer
more
lines.
develop here. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the read guide is really essential for that sort of thing, because that can have kind of front-loaded standards as far as repair goes for that sort of thing. And having that up front is so much the key, and having understanding and buy off from AAs to begin with.
Well, we also, the little direction we do have, agency direction we do have, it does talk very specifically about repairing those types of activities after, suppression related activities. It's basically thou shall, repair, you put in a line, you will repair it. That's what our handbook direction says, the Forest Service handbook direction says. The very little direction we do have on suppression repair, it does say that.
Yeah. I am wondering about the evolving thing, especially because in Region 5 and Region 6 with the fuel. But we're thinking about reopening in the future and using them. And so then that comes on, well, we have to reduce the fuels on the line and get that fuel off of there. Well, that's a different issue than repair. But how, like, who's paying for that? The P code paying for that or how, how much does the lead read have within the ask of that, and how are we dealing with it? And is it a bar thing? Is it a fire thing? Is it a P code thing? Is it a spare thing? Where is it?
Yeah. Well,
How's it
you know,
getting
one of
dealt
the
with,
things,
especially if
one of
we're
the things,
gonna contract this thing out for lots of money?
one of the things we're doing on the Oak Fire, the forest is doing, is they identified Matt Avery, a forester, he's starting to be embedded with the bear team and to help start formulating some of the forest long-term recovery response. So he's hearing what the bear team is collecting and what the bear team is doing and what's, you know, understanding the issues and everything. And I'm working with the forest too to kind of help make some of those links to prepare for a bar request or long-term recovery request and those types of things. So I think having that, you know, again, the awesome information the reads and reefs collect kind of set the stage for all those other things, and the observations are like super critical. So yeah, these are going to be some more longer term needs based on what we saw. Here's the data for it, and this is what we need to put in, you know, for a bar request, and we need to address these things in a longer term fashion. So I think we're thank goodness we don't have large fires this year so far, so we can sort of move forward on some of these things. We're not dealing with 500,000 acre monstrosities, and we can put some of these things into place and then ramp them up when we do have those things. So.
You know, Todd, one innovation that we came up with on the Park Service portion of the Dixie last year when I was the lead read is I had our Read GISS create us a separate collector map. And that was just for the resource advisors to identify potential bear issues, values at risk.
Yeah.
So it was completely separate from the suppression repair map, operations map, and it was just a point where they could put points in, they could put photos in, they could put descriptions in, obviously like instructed them what to look for. And that was really useful to hand off to the bear team leader even before he was on site to make that determination of what composition he needed for the bear team.
Yep.
And it kind of got them like on the right foot in terms of like, oh, these are some of the potential issues we might identify. And that was really simple.
Super helpful. Well, yeah, I mean, I took Lynn's drafty report and we provided that to the bear for the Oak Fire, provided that to the bear team. It was like, oh, these are some critical road issues and some other things, trail issues, and it helped the team sort of focus on areas, critical values to go visit and areas to pay more attention to with like below high burn severity and those kinds of things. So I think, you know, when we do have smaller fires, we can make those linkages a little bit easier. It's not, you know, we have the capacity to do that a little bit better. So it's good to be able to try those things this year.
That was quite the drafty report.
Very no, it was great. Pictures were great and everything, all that stuff was really good. So just as I'm just about done with the briefing paper for recommendation for read coordinator for Region 5, and we'll probably roll that out next week. And so our initial just have like a lead and co-lead to get us through this fire season is a recommendation, and then part 2 of that recommendation is having a detailer come in this winter and the spring to kind of help us prepare for FY 23-24 fire season. So that's and then having a regional team that with the lead, but having a regional team that because you know it covers so many different issues and program areas. Read and reef covers so having like a regional team to help formulate those, you know, direction and policy and address the issues that come up and help do that. So that's going to be, that's sort of our recommendation based on your guys' input. My recommendation to the region to move forward with this.
Exciting. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
So hopefully sometime in the next week or so, we're going to have a meeting with the RFT to roll that out.
Cool. About time.
About time. I know. It is about time. All right. Thanks, everybody. That was great. Have a good
Yeah.
day.
Great discussion. Thanks for chiming in, Todd.
Yep.
All right.
We still have sort of a big crowd if anybody has a question.
Actually, Tom, I don't think, so Forest Service regions 1, 4, 6, and almost 5 have regional READ coordinators to some degree, varying capacities. Is Region 2 working toward that?
You know, it's a great question. I don't really know. I've talked to our regional ecologist and our regional bear coordinator a little bit about that. There's the challenge. One of the challenges, there's not a lot of read depth in the regional office. It would have to be a, you know, it would have to be a new position. I don't know if at the higher level, at the regional forester level, that they've been discussing it at all. But it's something that I've asked about, because, you know, I think it's needed. I know that our forest supervisor locally is very much wants to put an emphasis on developing local resource advising capabilities. So, but yeah, I can't really speak outside of that as much. Been happy to have David around to kind of to lean in for the region at times.
Dave Calorie.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to call it a wrap. Hour and a half.
So, Lynn, I hit record
Yes,
and I'll
ma'am.
stop the record, but will you have access to it to post, or do I need to do that and send it to you?
Yeah. No, I think I'll have access to post. If I have a problem with it, I'll get a hold of you.
Okay.
Able to access other ones that other people started.
Okay.
Lynn, when are you leaving for Cedar Creek?
Resource order.
You're frozen there.
I
Only heard
don't have
resource
it.
order.
Yeah, that
You don't have
might
your
be
resource order yet.
power problem this morning.
Okay. Hey, would you let me know
Correct. I don't have my resource order yet.
would you let me know if there's any need for reefs down there? Because I've got a steady stream of people inquiring with me. It's been hard to find places for people to, assignments for people to go on this year. You probably have a steady
Right.
stream too, I bet.
I probably shovel them off to other people more often, or people think I'm too busy.
Oh, okay.
No, we could consider putting a spreadsheet of that on the cohort page.
That'd be good. Cool. All right, guys. That was fun. Good to see you again, Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah, you too, Cedar. I appreciate the texts.
Yeah, you bet.
job, panel. You did a really good
Thank
job. Had really good advice.
Yeah, thanks, Marissa.
Yeah, thank you for facilitating.
No problem.
All
Have
right.
a wonderful day, everybody.
Yeah, you
see
too.
ya.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Yeah.